All right, Chapter 8, Stout-Hearted Seven. Through boiling days and chilling nights, the wagon train struggled along the Snake River. 1 week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks. Several small streams came in from the south, gouging deep cuts into the earth, and to ford them, the wagons had to lurch down one side and crawl up the other. Everyone who could walk had to walk. Oxen lay down and died. People almost wished they could do the same. Clothing grew soiled and torn, for there was no water for washing or time in which to do it. Shoes wore out, and no one was there to repair them. Papa would have, Catherine told herself. He had always kept their shoes mended and soled and buttons sewn on. But now the girls were barefoot. The days were bad enough, but the nights were awful. Louise cried herself to sleep, calling for Mama. Matilda made no sound, but tears ran down her face, hurting Catherine more than Louise's cries. She and Elizabeth lay holding each other's hands, trying not to cry, but with an awful ache in their throat. Everyone was hungry. The small remaining stock of food had to be rationed carefully, but whatever there was, the Sager children received their share. Dr. Dagon ate very little, insisting he was too fat and needed to thin himself down. Bossy the cow, whose milk had kept the two smallest girls going, now gave almost none. At last came the day when through the gap in the cliffs the travelers saw the trail winding down to the Snake River at the famed Three-Island Crossing, one of the few places where wagons could ford the great stream. Here the river spread out 1,000 feet wide, but a particularly of the current had washed sand into a sort of a reef with 3 humps rising above the water level at this time of year. Between these islands, the sand lay in a path drivers could follow if they were clever and lucky. This was the most dangerous and most feared river crossing in the Oregon Trail. Many stories were told of wagons going down with animals tangled in their harnesses and of men drowning in an attempt to free them. While the Sagers waited their turn at the top of the grade, John nailed up the end gate so the girls could not slide out if the cart tipped. As they began to descend, the old cart's wobbly wheels swayed from side to side on the steep, slippery trail, and Catherine could hear John yelling and Dr. Dagon swearing in German at the poor oxen. Matilda and Louise shook in terror in her arms. Catherine was glad they could not see the river. She heard enough from the men's shouts to know it was frightening even to them. She heard them fasten their wagon beside their cart and remembered that John had told her this was one way to present a stronger resistance to the powerful current that might sweep a single vehicle off of the narrow ford into the deep water. A sickening sideways slip sent the cart into the river, but soon it steadied. Catherine could feel the tug of the current and the pull of the sand on the wheels. Water came up through the cracks in the floor, though John had caulked them with tar. "Pull up your feet into your lap," she told Louise, as she felt the ice-cold water curl around her bare toes. "We're all right. Brother John is out there keeping the oxen on the ford." She tried to sound sure, but inwardly she shook as much as her little sisters. Elizabeth was shaking too, but she did not say a word. Suddenly, the water drained away. The wheels moved more freely. "We're on the first island," Catherine said, and she felt Louise relax a bit. But then came the heart-stopping slide again, the pull of the current around her feet. She remembered that first time they had crossed a stream in Missouri and how frightened Mama had been, even though the wagon had rested solidly on the raft and strong men had pulled the sweeps. She was almost glad Mama was not here. After they crossed the third island, the ford turned upstream, and the oxen almost refused to breast the current. Dr. Dagon swore louder than ever, and the whipped crackled. And John and Frank yelled, "Get up there, you lazy good-for-nothings! You can't turn back here!" She could hear the thud of sticks on the oxen's flanks and shuddered at what her brothers were doing. They were not mean boys, and she knew they did not like to beat the poor tired animals. Just then, she felt the wagon on wheels hit the dry ground. All four girls were pitched backwards as the oxen labored up the steep slope. They had safely crossed the Snake. Captain Shaw headed north toward Fort Boise. Dr. Dagon, who knew a little French, told the children the name Boise came from a French word bois, meaning trees or woods. A pleasant thought. Maybe they would once more see trees. At present, however, their trail led over dry sandy plains and rolling hills where nothing but sagebrush grew. The staggering oxen found little to eat and less to drink, and even babies suffered from thirst. One night, the train had made a dry camp with only the tiniest sips of water for everyone, water they had carried from the Snake. At Fort Boise, there were no trees in sight and little possibility of replenishing the wagon train's supplies. This post, out in the desert, did not have much to spare, and they were able to buy only a little jerked meat. The children had become so weak and tired that they slept most of the day. Aunt Sally Shaw baked the last of her flour into one loaf of bread and divided it among her own half-starved children and the Saggers. There would be nothing but meat, and not much of it until they reached the Whitman Mission. Soon, the steady meat diet made everyone sick. Aunt Sally, feeling miserable herself, came every night to see how the Sagger children fared. From somewhere she got a little milk, which she portioned out, saving a few swallows for Dr. Dagon, who was very ill. He later said that the milk saved his life. "We must somehow get another cow, or these children will die before we cross the mountains," Aunt Sally told her husband. Not long afterwards, she came to the Sagger cart, leading a poor, broken-down cow whose ribs showed plainly under the skin. "She's not much for looks, but she still gives a little milk," she told the doctor. "Where did you get her?" "Billy." She never called her husband that. "The captain," as others. "We bought them from the Indians." "For how much?" He reached for his purse. Sally tossed her head. "What matter? Just some old clothes we didn't need. $5 worth at most. Forget it." She drew Louise into her arms. "How would you like a drink of milk, honey?" Then to the doctor, "If only we can keep them alive until we get to the Whitman Mission." While the days were still comfortably warm, the nights were freezing cold. The first thing families did when they made camp was to build a fire. Everyone gathered around close, but one night Elizabeth overdid it, and her full calico skirt, blown by the wind, swept across the flames. She screamed, and Dr. Dagon leaped to beat the fire out with his bare hands. She was not hurt, but his hands were so badly burned that he could not help with the driving for days. The next one to cause trouble was Louise. She still cried for Mama every night, and Catherine held her in her arms and sang to her as Mama used to do. Once she had collapsed into sleep, however, Catherine felt sure she would not move until morning, so she let herself relax. Then one night, Louise uncovered herself, grew cold, and woke in the darkness. She had moved away from Catherine, and, as she felt around the bed, found herself alone. "Mama?" she said softly, then more loudly, "Mama? Mama?" No one heard her weak little voice. She began to crawl toward the back of the cart. Somewhere out there, Mama must be waiting for her. She pulled up her little flannel nightgown, crawled over the end gate, and dropped to the ground. "Mama!" she cried more loudly now, but still no one answered her. Tripping over the long gown, she began to run. More and more wildly, she called, "Mama! Mama!" then broke into a prolonged wail. Sunk deep in sleep, neither Catherine in the cart nor the boys and Dr. Daggin in the tent heard her. But over in the Shaw wagon, Aunt Sally roused. What child could be out in the freezing night sobbing and crying? She shook her husband's shoulder. "Billy, there's a lost child somewhere outside. Hear it cry?" The captain stirred and swore under his breath. "Whoever has let their young'un get loose better find it themselves." "But Billy, a child could die of cold out there," his wife argued. Reluctantly, the captain crawled out of his warm blankets and went out into the bitter night. The baby voice seemed farther away now, but he could hear the cry, "Mama, Mama, where is you?" Now he knew who it was, that Sager baby. How had she managed to get out of the cart? A few minutes run, and he caught up with her and took her up in his big warm arms. "What are you doing out here, Louise?" "I went to find Mama." He carried her to the tent, stooped to get inside, and kicked at the first sleeping form he came to. It happened to be John. "Better watch your little sister closer," he advised as he passed Louise down to the waiting arms. She snuggled down and soon slept again. All right, so they made it across the Snake River. The oxen are getting very tired and sick. They're not wanting to pull the cart anymore. So John and Dr. Daggin are having to really hit them and kind of get them going. Okay, they're losing all of their strength. They don't have any milk. They don't have water except for what they can carry from the Snake River. So things are looking very bleak, and they haven't even gotten to the Blue Mountains yet. So this is a hard story. That was chapter 8. See if you can answer the questions for chapter 8. Look over them. And tomorrow I will post a video on answering them. All right, my friends, I'll talk to you later. Bye.